Monarch Nation, welcome back. We are in the Lions Den with Coach Tennant again. How you doing, Tennant?
I'm doing well, mate. Just come in from practice today, so we're getting organised and ready. We've got a couple of days before we leave to go down to Georgia Southern, so trying to prepare the guys as best as possible.
All right, before we get into looking at recent games and upcoming games, I'd like to talk to you about your assistants and your staff. I mean, you guys have a lot of responsibilities you have to take care of throughout the season and throughout the year. And you have three great assistants in Nathan, Josh, and Derek. Um, can you walk us through all the stuff they have to balance on a day-to-day basis to help keep this program running?
No, 110%. I think sometimes people mistake that when you do work in an environment like this, no matter what sport you're at, you just get to focus on the soccer side of things. But in reality, you're running a small business because at the end of the day, you've got a certain amount of money to be able to uh, organize, plan, um, travel, make sure that everything and all the needs of the players are taken care of on a daily basis. And, these days it takes a lot, and having three guys with me that, I trust and I know are going to do a good job, is paramount. And really, when I took over the job, and we've always done it where everybody kind of has distinct roles and responsibilities within it from a day-to-day basis, and I'll highlight those for each and every staff member. A lot of it we do together because we're all in close proximity, and but there are specified things that the guys need to do. For example, when you take Nathan, who's my associate head coach, obviously a big part of our year is on the recruiting side of things, and Nathan is what we would refer to as a recruiting coordinator. And what that basically means is he takes responsibility for making sure that we are traveling to all the events that we need to. We're identifying players that we need to be watching. We're setting schedules when we do get to those events, or yeah, on a day to day when we get there, so that we can see as much as we can, and then really organizing, whether it be phone calls with the player, visits with the player. And he takes a massive responsibility when it comes to that. And that is something that takes up an awful lot of time. We all have a responsibility in recruiting, but from the organizational piece of it, Nathan really takes the brunt of that. And it is a big help there. When it comes in, because the guys' academics is another big thing that we prioritize and put in there. And Nathan and myself both liaise with Rachel, our academic advisor, who is another fantastic member of our staff. So we got to make sure that the guys' class schedules are all up to date. They're getting and meeting expectations. So we'll take responsibility there. And then you're running the building every day. And between the four of us, you got to make sure that the guys are fed. Because we have food here for them. We got to make sure that they're getting all the nutrients that they need because they're training so hard. Um, you know, and then when we take it into the football side of things, um, Nathan is typically Nathan's a goalkeeper coach. He was a goalkeeper, so he takes the main responsibility with our goalkeepers on a daily basis, and sessions within our sessions what they will be doing. Josh really is my right hand man when it comes to the planning and execution of training sessions. And really, how that role has developed is for the longest time when I was the assistant and the associate here, I did probably 85-90% of the coaching on a weekly basis, on a daily basis. For me, bringing someone like Josh in, who I've worked with before and know what his level of coaching and experience is in that sort of a realm, gives me the opportunity then to take a step back in training. So my voice doesn't need to be heard as much, in that setting, and he can really take control of sessions so that when I step in, obviously there's a little bit more of an oomph or a meaning to it, when I have to. Um, there's Derek really is, being in the position that he's in, obviously as an up and comer, he gets sort of the grunt work a lot of the time, making sure that when we're on the road, the meals are planned, the itineraries are done. We're liaising with the bus company. We're, making sure that everything that we need in the building and, on campus is taken care of. And he does a great job on that front as well. So there's all of these different areas that you kind of have to hit, and everyone kind of takes responsibility for certain pieces of that. But at the end of the day, we're all holding each other accountable, and making sure that things get done on a daily basis. But there's a lot more to do than just coach training sessions every day.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it briefly before we started, but I mean, recruiting has become a year-round thing at this point.
A
Um,
100%. Like I said, if you're not recruiting 24/7, 365, you're going to fall behind the curve. Especially, you always talk about which universities or which programs you're competing against, in order to bring in talent. And at the end of the day, we're very fortunate. We have the ability to go to a lot of different events. We can go to Europe, we can go all around the world, and we got to be careful with it sometimes, just from a budgetary standpoint. But the teams that we're competing against, some of them have the ability to do a lot of extra things. So that groundwork that you have to put in, and the relationships, that's a really important thing for me. And first and foremost, you can go and look and find a lot of talented players, but the staff know this from me, that it's people, the person, that you're recruiting is important to me, and we have to spend a lot of time making sure that that player meets the character traits and characteristics that we think that a young man should possess in order to be a part of our program. And look, you get it right, you get it wrong. You don't get the ability to spend multiple days with them so that you can really dig into it, but we do our homework a lot, not just with that player, but getting to speak with their coaches that they're working with right now, or we get a lot of contacts and people within the game that will have been around certain players, and you have to really delve into their background to find out who they really are, and what is it that they embody as a young man. Because ultimately, in my experience, the people and the character within a team is more impactful than the talent in the team. You got to have talented players, but you have to have good people.
all right. Now let's talk about this last couple of weeks of soccer. Last week we got 3 points on a trip to Myrtle Beach.
Hmm.
After a stretch of games where scoring seemed to kind of hit a wall, you guys broke through in a big way, scoring 3 goals, breaking a winless streak, and getting to 5 wins on the year, which matched last year's win total. Um, Successful trip to Myrtle Beach. Can you talk to us a little bit more about this game, and what do you think kind of was the difference here?
Yeah, Coastal this year started off the year pretty slowly, and their head coach down there, Sean Downing, very experienced, has been in the game for a long time. About 3 or 4 games before they played us, they made a big tactical switch in what they were doing. They got beat pretty heavily by Georgia Southern, and then they decided that instead of trying to maybe play a more open style of football, that they were going to focus defensively, and get numbers behind the ball and trying to frustrate teams, which worked for them. They played a very, very low block 5-4-1, and got 3 draws in a row against Campbell, Marshall, and uh, JMU. So they were coming into the game really sort of, they buckled up defensively, feeling good about themselves. And it was going to be a difficult proposition on the road, just because they were feeling good and it had worked for them. I think our mentality and mindset going into it was, how do we break them down? And when we do break them down, can we capitalize? Because I sort of felt that if we got one, because they had been so successful at it, it's, you get one, then the floodgates will open. Because it's a difficult way to get players to buy into. Especially over a long period of time, and when it starts to wobble a little bit, it becomes a little bit more difficult to manage. Luckily, on the evening, we knew that we had to set up not differently, but we needed to find pockets of space that we maybe hadn't been finding against other teams, because they would press us and try to give us space in behind them. We knew we weren't going to have space in behind, so we needed to find space in between lines in front of their back five. And at times it looked like a back six. And luckily, went down there. Coastal have built a fantastic new facility, so it was a great place to play. We were really fortunate early in the game. A nice passage of play. We were able to find Mikey wide, and then get numbers into the box. And Williams done a great job with the finish. So to break that duck and sort of get on a roll, we were feeling good about that. Now on the flip side of it, obviously we won the game 3-2. We did a poor job. They're a very big, sort of athletic team. They got some big guys, big center forward. He puts himself around a little bit, and when they have the ability to dump the ball into the box from set plays, they can be pretty effective. They were effective against us anyway. So that was disappointing. We let them back into the game. It went 1-1, and then obviously Marcelo scored one of the best goals of the season. I think you'll see, across the country. Then we let them back into it again from a long throw. And then obviously a little set piece routine that we hadn't worked on the training ground. It just kind of sort of happened. We told the guys to try something a little bit different on the sideline, and they did, and it came off. So, we were able then to finish the game out pretty well. And I was really happy with the character that the guys showed, because like you talked about, we had struggled to score. We had played a series of games where, even though we played decently, and especially on the front end of that little run, we didn't get what we felt we deserved. And there's always that wobble, or can we actually get over the hump here? And they did. And I know, at the end of the game, it was a little bit touch and go. The referee went to VAR with 2 seconds left on the clock. So I had a little bit of a heart attack moment. My wife was sitting at home, and when I talked to her after the game, I don't think she got any sleep after the game because she was that riled up. So yeah, it was a good performance against a team that was well organized, and we were able to go and get the 3 points.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about that strike from Marcelo, because
Yep.
that was a beauty outside the box. I don't know the distance on that kick, but it was pretty far out.
Yeah, you're probably talking 30, maybe 30 yards, somewhere in and around there. And Marcelo has that type of ability. You watch him at the end of training sometimes, and he has that ability to hit. So it's like a side foot kind of knuckle that has become all the rage these days with some of the top players. That was never around when I was playing. So he caught it really, really well. And I really felt sorry for their keeper, because the 3 weeks before, they're talking about him in the national, things about, he's come a long way. And then obviously he's conceded those 2 goals, and he couldn't do anything about Marcelo's, and he ended up getting subbed off at halftime. So obviously, difficult for that lad, but some strike, and that's what Marcelo's capable of. He is capable of special things, and we've got to find ways to give him the confidence to do more of that. It doesn't always have to be from that type of a range, but he is a player that has a lot of ability, and that's just some of the things that he can do.
All right, and obviously that game winner, that was some good teamwork off the corner. Um, was that as designed, or did that just kind of?
Yeah, we've been. I know Nathan's banging his head against the wall with set plays right now, as am I. We they have to have a bit of conviction, to go and get on something, and we've sort of lacked that a little bit. And in the game, you look at their setup, and you're trying to find ways before the game that you can break that down, or what should we do? And we've had some joy at pulling players out of position. When teams are set up zonally like they were, or they're actually in a man-to-man, but we were able to pull some around so that we should have scored early from Marcelo at the top of the box as well. But we noticed that there was a hole at the front post, and really it wasn't something that we had drawn up before the game, but we got a little break in play, and the guys were over in the huddle, and Nathan, talked to Benno and Evan, and was like, try and bring something to the front post, and open up that gap there, to get across it, and they did. And like, it wasn't planned. It was just kind of off the cuff that way. We wanted to hit that area, and we wanted to target that area, but Big Ed's got his hips around it just enough. Got just enough on it to put it in the bottom corner. So I'm glad for them that they were able to get something from it, because we've been very frustrated with the lack of, not the lack of opportunities, but we've created some opportunities that we could have done better with, and others that maybe teams have defended well. So that's part of the winning culture. You need to be good in these situations on both sides of the ball. And we maybe just have lacked a little bit of conviction there this year.
I will say, I mean, watching this team this year, you can see the growth. There's a lot more opportunities. You guys are beating a lot of teams with shots. You're winning the the corner totals each game for the most part. So those opportunities are there. It's just more about taking advantage of those opportunities moving forward. But the growth is clear on the field, I think, this season.
Yeah, I think between the two 18-yard boxes, and goes back to something I said a few weeks ago to the lads. It's like, you can be good in between the two 18s, but in reality, you have to be good in both 18s. That's where the business end of the game is. It's like I'll use a darts analogy. Not a lot of darts fans in the United States, as much as in Europe, but it's like trebles for show and doubles for dough. Where it's like the double wins the game. That's the one that you've got to be the best at. And we can talk about all of the things in between. And we have made a lot of progress in that type of way. And I'm really proud of that. And that's something the guys have to, take with them. But at the end of the day, we have to find that conviction in both the 18-yard boxes in order to prevent goals and then to go and get on the end of things. The guys know that. So I'm really hoping in these last few games here of the season, moving into the postseason, it's like, can somebody take the responsibility on both sides and say, no, I'll get the job done for you. And we're more than capable. It's just, we got to just get that little bit of edge in those two areas and find ways to get wins.
Now, I was going to talk about South Carolina, but I feel like we just did. Because, I mean,
Yeah,
that was the game where you guys dominated shots and corners and you dominated possession, but just a few defensive errors lead to some goals for the Gamecocks, and they're 3 points.
Yeah, I was really disappointed in the way that we started the game. We went out. South Carolina are in a 3-5-2. A little bit of a different formation. A little bit more expansive, and we went to press in a way that we felt like we could get numbers around the ball and make it difficult for them. And I don't think we had the buy-in, in the first 15 minutes of the game, and we started slowly, and we allowed them a little bit to dictate what they were doing, and as always is the way, you allow them an opportunity to score, and we went through it today, and there's a multitude of things that I think went wrong in there, and we've got to be a lot more savvy about what we need to do in certain areas of the field in order to stop situations like that. But then when you go 1-0 down, and it's then a couple of things happen, and you realize, no, we can play here. This works. This is going. This is working for us. So we get it right defensively, and then that means that we have more of the ball, and we start moving them, and we make it difficult for them. And the first half, we didn't really create anything too clear cut. But then in the second half, it's the Alamo. We control the game, we move them. And then it becomes the focus is on us trying to score. And in our rest defense, you kind of, again, you make a silly mistake in the build-up, and then we don't defend properly. And then, 2-0. And it's like you're doing this to yourself. So there's a huge disappointment from the players on that side of things, because at the end of the day, they're not stupid. They know. They understand. And it's our job as a staff to make sure that issues like that are addressed and we take care of them moving forward. That's part of the growth of the team. And then, when it comes to it I think the Y Scout had it where, it was 19 opportunities or 19 shots on goal. But, for me, we had 3-4, real good opportunities to score goals that we haven't taken. And, that goes to the side of things again, where we just don't do enough to get the result. I was frustrated at the end. We had a little bit of momentum. I know we talked about it earlier, but there was the offside goal. The referee, I agree with. He's had to go to VAR for it, because there was an offside given, and on the VAR, from the angle of the feed, and all the things that go into that, there is no conclusive evidence to say that he is or he isn't. My frustration came that when you actually go back to the video, when you look at the wide angle version of the game, the linesman who gave the offside call isn't in line. He's not. He's behind the play, so he can't see if the player's offside or not. So he's guessed, and then we have to go into a situation where we're asking the referee to look at something that it doesn't give conclusive evidence on anything. So a little bit disappointed there, because with 5 minutes still left in the game, with the momentum that we were carrying, it gives you the chance. Not saying that you're going to, but it gave us a really good opportunity then to get an equaliser. Whereas the decision then deflates the situation, and you limp into the end of the game. So disappointed, and we had to be really thoughtful with the players. When it came to Monday, I challenged them a little bit, on Sunday night after the game, and they've responded really well to that, because they know the gravity of the situation moving forward. You got to go and you got to pick up 3 points, in one of these two games. So it's football. It happens sometimes, and we were just in the wrong end of one of those ones where performance good, result bad.
Yeah. So back to the VAR thing. So obviously he's in bad position to make the call. He probably should have
Can't see it,
convened
don't
with
make the
his
call.
right. But if the VAR is inconclusive, they can't go to video.
Well, the VAR is the video. So
Okay.
they go to VAR as what video assistant referee. Really, VAR for us is a camera that's on the sideline, where
Okay.
we have a speedo system that sort of gives you the wide angled view of the game, and the referees use that to to make decisions. Look, I have my opinions on VAR and its use in college soccer. I quite frankly think it's ridiculous. You're putting undue stress on referees who aren't professionals and are forced into making decisions all the time. And at the end of the day, unless we're at the top level, and some schools do have really fantastic camera systems that give multi-angle views, but there's 10 of them. The rest of us have one camera that is at a height where you can't see detail in the game. We've had a couple of things this season, that you're looking back on and you're going, not just for us, or not just against us, but for us as well. Like it's slowing the game down. Our games are taking, I don't know what the average is, but it's a 90-minute game that's taken 2.5 hours. So it's added another layer there that I'm not sure is doing the game any justice at this level.
All right. Well, I'm glad you walked us through that, because I'm just envisioning the very high level VAR you see in like the Premier League and on the World Cup, where it's all
and the issues that they're having with it, at that level. And I understand in the Premier League and in the Champions League, where there are millions and millions of dollars or pounds or things that are on the line, and the details in those things matter. The one thing that I think that we forget really, really completely is we aren't pros. There's still the development side of things here. And what I mean by that is, when you're a child and you start playing soccer at 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, in an organized, game, and there's a referee or there's things that happen, soccer is a teacher. Soccer teaches you that things aren't fair. Soccer teaches you that the ball doesn't lie. Soccer teaches you so many things. And for me, right up until this point, because again, we're not pros, you got to learn. There are teaching moments in this. And as coaches, that's part and parcel of our job, in order, when those things happen or when life isn't fair, in order to give the players context in how to make things better, or to control what you can control. That's a little bit philosophical, but at the end of the day, I just don't know that if we can't do it to the level that it needs to be done, that it is doing any positive thing for the players. All it's doing is getting the coach's gratification of looking at a video and screaming onto the field all the time about things getting reviewed. And I think that has a really poor effect on the players, and gives them, they're always calling for this or have a look at that. And I just don't know that it's the right teaching tool or the right thing for the level that we're at.
I mean, you made a great point about the technology. If you don't have the technology, why are we trying to use it?
Yeah. Why we're and it's not it's mandated. So at certain conferences mandated, or others don't, and that's the other thing. Some conferences you don't have to use it out of conference, or there's all these different stipulations with it, and if all 206 programs can't do it, what's the point?
Right.
Because we can go on the road at a conference and we don't have VAR. So we're having to spend money on infrastructure in order to put these things in because it's mandated. I just don't understand.
All right. So moving towards this kind of last week of the regular season, this Friday, the Monarchs take the trip to Statesboro, Georgia, to take on Georgia Southern, 7 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Talk to us about this Georgia Southern team and what fans can expect to see from them.
Well, Georgia Southern have turned their fortunes around. For a couple of years there, they had sort of been down on their luck and had struggled. They were taken over last year by Lee Squires. Lee is an English coach who I actually played against back in the day when I was in college, in the summer times when we were playing the old PDL. And Lee was a good football player, centre forward, and I had a couple of battles with him in my time. But Lee was a long time D2 coach. He was at Lander. And did a good job there. And when Georgia Southern came up and they hired him, and Lee's a good coach, and he's got them organised, and he's brought in some good players, and they've made a big jump this year, and they've improved. So it's going to be a difficult task. They're organised. We've got to find ways to break them down, and we got to find ways to stop some of their guys who can be dangerous. It's going to be a little bit more of a matchup player for player, just in terms of the last few games. We've seen a few 3-back systems and, teams doing a few different things, but, typically they're in a 4-4-2, 4-5-1, some kind of variation of a 4-back. So I think it's going to be a really interesting game. It's a good pitch to go down and play on. It's not the worst place in the whole world, to play football. So, really excited about it. At the end of the day, there's a little bit of we've got to go and get something from this feeling to it. But we're more than capable of that. And we've shown that. We just need to focus the next couple of days and getting the mentality right. Well, how do we make sure that we arrive and we are ready to go from the outset and take advantage, of the game. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll get on the road and, last home game or last away game in conference play. So we know what is expected of us.
All right. And then next Tuesday is senior night at the Den. We are facing off against James Madison at 7 p.m. We'd like to have as many fans as we can out there to celebrate these seniors and support them against a very talented Duke team who, they're just outside the top 25 right now. They're having a fantastic season. Quite the challenge for senior night. Talk to us about this James Madison team and what's made them successful this season.
Yeah, well, first, touching on the group of guys that we're going to be moving on. It's my first kind of class that you kind of bring through a lot of guys that I have been with for quite a few years, and then others who we've brought to the program this year who I have really good relationships with, and it'll be a great way to send them on their way for this last home game of the regular season. So it'd be great to see a lot of faces out to support them because they've been fantastic for this program, especially those guys that have been here for a long time. But yeah, JMU, look, Paul has taken over a program and has worked really hard to build a winning culture. I have a lot of respect for Paul and what he's been able to do there. And, we know a lot of their guys. It's an in-state rival. You end up recruiting some of the same kids, and there's a lot of crossover. Their big centre back, David Matarazzi, is best friends with Andrew Bennett on our team. They played in the summertime together at Lions Bridge. So, it's what we call a derby. It's in state. There's a lot on the line that type of way as well. So, we went up there last year and went 1-0 up after not playing too well, and then ended up falling sort of late, and that was disappointing. So we've got a little bit of a score to settle. But yeah, it'll be another great matchup. They're really well organized, well-oiled machine. And it'll be difficult to break them down. And they've got some special players that can do some special things, but so do we. So we gotta make sure that I'm not looking at that one yet. At the end of the day, Georgia Southern comes first. But when it does come to Tuesday, hopefully we can recover well and make sure that we're able to finish off the season really well here on our home ground.
All right. So speaking of senior night, we talked to Angie about this, and she's not a fan of it being the last game of the season. She says it's too distracting and it's sad, and then all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, you got to play a soccer game. So, what are your feelings on the emotions surrounding senior day and it being the last game of the season when the game is so critical and the points are so critical?
Yeah, you're everyone's going to have their own feeling about it. At the end of the day, it's a game of football, and you got to be up for it. You got to handle those emotions. Like this isn't, we're talking about 22-year-old men, so there has to be a little bit of, you know, self-regulation there in terms of what you're doing. I'm really proud of them, but at the end of the day, we're going to work tonight, so we'll celebrate it in the right way and do the right things. And it's for me, it's meaningful. I had senior days. We hadn't done it here for a long time. Alan had that very same type of, he had real no interest in it. It was let's get the business. But I do think that there needs to be recognition. Whether I choose to do it at the end of the year, next year, it was kind of just thrust upon us this year because of the schedule and everything that went that way. Maybe I'll be a little bit more thoughtful about it next year. If we win, we'll keep it at the last day of the season. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's not like we're dealing in kids here. We're dealing in men, and the men have to make sure that we show up and we take care of what we take care of, no matter what the fanfare might be, before the game. And we go on the road and you play against teams that's their senior night, and it affects both teams. It's because you're standing around waiting on this and that, and it's just something that you got to deal with. But it's part of college sports, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very American thing. We do it in high school as well. So, I mean, for the seniors, it's really a beautiful moment, I think, and for the families.
Without a doubt, and I agree with you there. And you said it's a very American thing, and there are lots of things. Me and Angie are, but we're not Americans, So it's like when you don't grow up with something or it's not part of your culture, then you're going to have a certain thing about it. But there's certain things that I think in American culture that add, to the spectacle. Like one of the things that I absolutely love is you play the national anthem before every sporting event. This is the only place in the world that does that, and it's patriotic and it's meaningful. And there's at no point am I standing going, "Why are we doing this?" It adds something, to it, and I think it's a massive part of the culture. And senior night or recognizing people that have done a tremendous job over a period of time, for a team is something that should be recognized as well. So I'm all for the American culture side of things.
All right. Appreciate that, Tennant. Good luck in Statesboro this weekend. Can't wait to root you on against JMU next Tuesday night at the Den, 7 p.m. Get there. Let's celebrate these seniors and root them on to victory over our rivals, JMU. Thanks again, Tennant. Go Monarchs.
Not a problem, mate. Thanks, guys.